December 29, 2014, from the Florida Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida. It was the Russell Athletic Bowl between the Oklahoma Sooners and the Clemson Tigers. So the Sooners would get the ball first. They started out with it on their own 25 after the opening kickoff. They would go 3 and out on their first possession and punt from their own 29. So now the Tigers would take over on their own 35. And on first down, Cole Stoudt hit Artavis Scott for a 65-yard touchdown as the Tigers put the first points on the scoreboard, with the score now Clemson 7, Oklahoma 0. So now the Sooners would take over on their own 25 after the kickoff with about 13 and a half minutes left in the first quarter. And on first down, Trevor Knight was sacked by Vic Beasley. And so after 3 plays, they would go 3 and out and punt from their own 13 as they lost 12 yards on the possession. And now the Tigers would take over on their own 46 after the punt with 12 minutes left in the first quarter. They got down into Oklahoma territory all the way down to the Oklahoma 13. But on 3rd and 5, Cole Stoudt was sacked by Agbayana Okoronkwo. Probably said that name wrong. I apologize. Did my best. But so they brought out Ammon Lakip to attempt a 34-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and now the Tigers are up by 10 with the score Clemson 10, Oklahoma 0. So now the Sooners would take over on their own 25 with about 8.5 left still in the first, and they would move the ball up towards midfield. They were faced with a 2nd and 5 from the 42. Trevor Knight picked up 7 for the first down at the 49, but then a pass interference call against the offense would move them all the way back to their 34. And on 1st and 25 from the 34, Trevor Knight dropped back to pass. He was intercepted by Corn Wiggins. And so now the Tigers would take over on the Oklahoma 20 with about 6.5 minutes still left in the first quarter. They're then faced with a 3rd and 6 from the Oklahoma 16. Cole Stoudt dropped back to pass. He was sacked by Eric Stryker. He dropped him for a 9-yard loss. And so out would come Ammon Lakip to attempt a 42-yard field goal, and it was blocked by Chuka Noodaloo. And so now Oklahoma would take over on their own 37 after the blocked field goal, as it remained 10-0 Clemson over Oklahoma. So it was on the Oklahoma 37 with about 4.5 still left in the first. They were then faced with a 3rd and 7 from the 40. Trevor Knight dropped back to pass. He was intercepted by Ben Boulware, and he returned it 47 yards for the pick 6 and the touchdown. And with the extra point, it was now Clemson 17, Oklahoma 0. And so now the Sooners would take over after the kickoff on their own 25 with about 3.5 minutes left in the first quarter. And after 5 plays, they would end up punting from their own 37. So now the Tigers would take over after the punt with about 1.5 minutes left in the first quarter. They had the ball on their own 20. They picked up a first down, a couple of first downs, and they got into Oklahoma territory. They were then faced with a 2nd and 1 from the Oklahoma 37. Cole Stoudt dropped back, and he hit Mike Williams for a 3-yard reception and a first down at the 34 as the first quarter came to a close. So after 1 quarter of play, the score was Clemson 17, Oklahoma 0. So now to begin the second quarter, the Tigers had the ball on the Oklahoma 34, was 1st and 10, but they wouldn't get another first down, and out would come Ammon Lakip to attempt a 49-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and the score was now Clemson 20, Oklahoma 0. So now with 14 minutes still left before halftime, Oklahoma would get the ball on their own 25 after the kickoff, and they would go 3 and out and punt from their own 28. And now the Tigers would take over after the punt on their own 20 with a little less than 13 minutes on the clock in the second quarter. And they would bring the ball to midfield and into Oklahoma territory. They got it all the way down to the 26. It was 3rd and 7. Cole Stoudt dropped back, and he had Mike Williams for the 26-yard touchdown pass to make it Clemson 27, Oklahoma 0. So now the Sooners would get the ball on their own 5-yard line after the kickoff, backed up against their own end zone with about 7.5 minutes left before halftime, and after 5 plays, they would end up punting from their own 30. So they were able to get out of the shadow of their own end zone, and now Clemson would take over after the punt on their own 18 with a little over 4 minutes left before halftime. They would go 3 and out as Cole Stoudt was sacked by Stryker, and it was a double sack. The punting unit came out, and so they punted the ball. Oklahoma would now take over on their own 49 with about 3 minutes left in the second quarter. They picked up a first down, and then on 2nd and 10 from the Clemson 24, Samai Perrine ran the ball, and he was dropped for a 7-yard loss. He fumbled it, and Grady Jarrett forced the fumble. It was recovered by Ben Boulware, and so now the Tigers would take over on their own 31 with about a minute and a half left before halftime. And then they would end up going 3 and out and punting the ball, and so now Oklahoma would get it back with about a little less than a minute, about half a minute left, and they would end up bringing the first half to a close with the run by Ford. So after the first half, it was Clemson 27, Oklahoma 0, and to begin the second half, Clemson would get the ball first. They had it on their own 25 after the kickoff, but after 7 plays, they would end up punting from the Oklahoma 35. Actually, so then Oklahoma would get the ball on their own 10-yard line, and they would go 3 and out and punt from their own 9. So now Clemson would get the ball back with about 11 minutes left in the third. They had it at midfield on their own 50. They got it all the way down to the 2-yard line. It was first and goal, and Cole Stoudt ran it in himself for the 2-yard touchdown. It was now Clemson 34, Oklahoma 0. So now Oklahoma to get the ball on their own 14. They went 3 and out and punted from their own 23. Clemson got the ball back. They went 3 and out, and they would end up punting from their own 28. And now Oklahoma got the ball back with 6.5 minutes on the clock in the third. They had it on their own 28, and that's where they would punt from as they went 3 and out yet again. Now Clemson got the ball on their own 20 with 6 minutes left in the third, and they finally started moving the ball. It was 3rd and 5 from the 25. Cole Stoudt hit Mike Williams for a 31-yard reception and made a first down to Oklahoma territory at the 44. They would then continue to move it. They got down to the 24. It was 2nd and 15. Cole Stoudt dropped back to pass, and he hit Germone Hopper for a 24-yard touchdown. They actually missed the extra point, and so now it was Clemson 40, Oklahoma 0. So now the Sooners would get the ball with a little less than 2 minutes left in the third. They had it on their Clemson 35. Actually, no. They had it on their own 25. And so now they would end up faced with a 1st and 10 from the Oklahoma 49. And Keith Ford fumbled the ball. Josh Watson forced the fumble, and Jerron Kearse recovered for the Tigers. So now Clemson would get the ball with just seconds left in the third quarter. They would bring the third quarter to a close with the ball on their own on the Oklahoma 44. So after 3 quarters of play, the score was Clemson 40, Oklahoma 0. So now to open up the fourth quarter was 3rd and 9 from the Oklahoma 44 for the Tigers, and they would end up punting the ball as they went 3 and out on the possession. They punted from their own 48. So now Oklahoma, or from the Oklahoma 48, Oklahoma now took over on their own 4-yard line, backed up against their own end zone with 14 minutes left in this game, down by 40 points. They would bring the ball to the midfield, but after 10 plays, they would end up punting from their own 45. So now the Tigers would take over on their own 2-yard line, backed up against their own end zone with 10 minutes left in regulation. And they ended up going 3 and out and punting from their own 2 as they punted from their own end zone. And so now Oklahoma would take over with 8.5 minutes left, down by 40, and the ball on the Clemson 43 after the punt. They're then faced with a 2nd and 10 after picking up a first down. It was 2nd and 10 on the 33, and Samai Perrine ran 22 yards all the way to the 11-yard line. And on first down, Alex Ross ran it in for the 11-yard touchdown as the Sooners put their first points on the scoreboard late here in the game with about 7 minutes left to play. But they didn't get 7 points as the field goal or the extra point was blocked. So the extra point was blocked, and so it was Clemson 40, Oklahoma 6. So now Clemson would get the ball on their own 26, up by 34. And they would end up punting after 4 plays from their own 33. So now the Sooners would get the ball back on their own 24 after the punt with less than 4 minutes left to play. Trevor Knight dropped back, and he was intercepted by T.J. Green. So now the Tigers would take back over. They had it on their own 39, but they would end up going 3 and out and punting from the 36. They actually lost yards on that possession. Now Oklahoma would take over on their own 20 with a little over 2 minutes left to play. They would bring the ball to midfield, but the game came to a close with a 20-yard run by Alex Ross that would bring it to the Clemson 24, but it was over. It was over a long time ago, as the final score was Clemson 40, Oklahoma 6, as the Tigers dominate in the Russell Athletic Bowl. They finished with a record of 10-3 on the season. They came into the game ranked 17. Oklahoma is 8-5 on the season. And for Clemson, Cole Stoudt was 26 for 36. He had 319 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game. And Trevor Knight was 17 for 37 with just 103 yards passing and 3 interceptions. The leading rusher in the game was Samaje Perine. He had 23 carries for 134 yards for the Sooners. And the leading rusher for the Tigers was Wayne Gallman. He had 19 carries for 55 yards. And the leading receiver in the game was Artavis Scott of the Clemson Tigers. He had 8 receptions for 114 yards and a touchdown. Mike Williams had 9 receptions for 112 yards and a touchdown. And Charone Peake had 2 receptions for 40 yards. And Adam Humphries had 5 receptions for 28 yards. And Germone Hopper had that 1 reception for 24 yards, which was a touchdown. And for the Sooners, Micah Quick had 7 receptions for 46 yards. And Samaje Perine had 3 receptions for 22 yards to go along with his 134 yards rushing that I mentioned a moment ago. And the Tigers had 3 interceptions in this game. They picked off Trevor Knight 3 times. And it was Ben Boulware, Corin Wiggins, and TJ Green each getting picks. So the Clemson Tigers just dominate the Sooners in this game, making a big statement for the ACC. They win this game with the final score: Clemson 40, Oklahoma 6.